But the NFL has continued their expansion to Europe. Now, it's something we've talked about, or you talked about with Tallboy Radio, God, what, in April sometime?
Yeah.
And they just had another episode, by the way, where they talked to an NFL person over there. I think it's an NFL podcaster who lives in the UK about the expansion, but the NFL just wrapped up all their London games. And I'm going to say this, and it doesn't mean to be disparaging. I remember nothing from any of the London games, and I watched all 3 of them.
I don't remember anything outside of the game, but I mean, how often do you remember anything beyond what happens on the field in a lot of other games? I mean, I don't find myself watching a lot of NFL games and be like, man, this atmosphere is crazy, and so I think I just watch it. I almost forget it's in London, to me, it just seems like any other NFL game, honestly, and I don't really mind the early game. It's like it just fills the day even more with football.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me that it's at 9:30, but I think the NFL is very clearly trying to push a move to London in some fashion. And we talked about this offline a couple of days ago, but now we're looking at what they've done. And they did an experiment this time. And I think even Roger Goodell said it on the airwaves or in an interview somewhere that the Buffalo Bills were kind of an experiment to see what would happen if a team was over there and the Jags were there for 2 weeks, 2 weeks in a row, and what would happen to teams that had to go over there without any of that rest, without getting to prep. Because that first game, both teams go over there at the same time and they have time to prep. But the Buffalo Bills go on a short week. And I thought it was interesting to hear the commissioner say this out loud, that the Buffalo Bills were being used as a guinea pig. But it's obvious that they want to put a team there. It seems like the Jacksonville Jaguars are the team that they're eyeing. There has to be data to support this in terms of the people not going to the games in Jacksonville. But I think they want more. Do you agree?
Are you saying you think they want more than one team or more than? Okay, so yeah, we talked about this, and to talk about the Jaguars specifically, when I did the episode with the Tallboy Radio guys, they were very adamant that they thought it would be a struggle to put a team there permanently because they wouldn't have a fan base. That when they have these games now, it's more of a celebration of American football in general. Everybody comes out in their own little specific team jerseys of the team they root for. And it, like I said, just a general celebration. It's not the passionate fan base for one specific team. There would be no home field advantage. Those are the types of points they're making. And fair points. But my thought is the Jags seem to be the team that they're putting over there more and more. And so is this something that the NFL is aware of? Are they aware of this fact that they know that they're going to have to already have an established fan base there before they move a team? So are they trying to slowly develop and organically grow a fan base of Jaguars fans in London in preparation of, even if it's 10 years from now, fully moving them to the UK, to London specifically, and they'll move in with a full up-and-coming, growing, existing fan base. And so that's one interesting piece. And then I think when we talked about more than one team, do you say 2 teams? Do you say a division and then a division, a full division? Now we're talking about expansion. You and I think, both agree that you can't really put an expansion team in Europe because they're not going to be any good to start out with. And I think it'll kind of fall on its face. I think you have to put established brands and established stars over there if you want it to have any chance, because otherwise, if it's an expansion team, it's just going to be a glorified version of the NFL Europe that failed miserably, because it's going to be a bunch of mid players who aren't at that elite level, and they're not going to draw fans. So that means you need to move existing teams there. And so then that brings up the discussion of who else would be a good fit to relocate to the UK or to Europe. And then if those teams move to Europe and you're going to do some sort of expansion, what cities in the United States are worthy and capable of hosting an NFL franchise?
I think that's the tough part. The last part is, where do you expand the NFL in this country? Because the major networks or the major cities have already really been populated. And it's not like baseball, which is what we're going to talk about next. It's not a regional sport. It's a national sport. The NFL is huge. Like, you can now watch every team on Red Zone or Sunday Ticket or whatever. Doesn't matter where you live. You don't have to root for the team that is in your city. So I don't know where they expand to. And I think you're right. They can't put an expansion team in London. They cannot put a crappy team in a brand new city, especially an international city that they have been feeding all of these teams over the last decade plus, and then say, okay, here's the bottom of the barrel in terms of teams. So thank you for your loyalty. Here's your prize, an absolutely shitty team for God knows how long, because the NFL, it's salary cap sport, drafting and everything. You got to get a lot of the things right. And an expansion team is starting at the bottom. And the only expansion team that I know that has done anything with itself in the 5 years is the Golden Knights just won the Stanley Cup, and they went the first year. That's an outlier. Most don't do very well.
The Jags, I think, I want to say early on, with the year they brought in the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Carolina Panthers, that both of them, if it wasn't the first year, it might have been like the second year. I think they both made it to like the NFC, AFC championship games, respectively, if I'm not mistaken.
They did. And then there has been a lot of low periods, more for the Panthers than anything else. The Panthers had a slight resurgence in the early 2000s, and the Jaguars had a couple of good years there. But, I mean, there have been a lot of bad years. It stinks because you're starting at the bottom. And also Tom Coughlin was their coach. Like, who do you get to go coach out there? There's so many other factors in bringing a team out of the United States to London. And it's not Canada, where you can just take a hop, skip, and a jump right over the border and be there. It's hours and hours in another time zone, like a even further time zone. There's just a lot of other factors that go into it. I'm curious how the NFL goes with this, though, because I feel like they have already been leading on the people of London and the people of England for long enough. At some point, they got to pull the trigger, because you'd think they want to tap into that market 100% instead of just a few times a year, right?
You'd think so, but then maybe there's an argument to be made that would you rather get 100% attendance and whatever else that comes along with it 4 times a year, as opposed to if you only got 60% attendance, I guess you split the schedule in half, 9 times a year, 8 times a year. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know, someone smarter than me could determine the worthiness of that. But another aspect that the TBR guys made, or a point they made, was that the taxes over there are significantly higher. They're taxed at a much higher rate than we are here, which would make, we see it just here in the United States, that players want to play in the states that have no state income tax.
Yes.
You see that a lot. And so, it's going to be tough probably to attract free agents, high-profile free agents to these teams in Europe. And I can't imagine what the difference. It's not like we're saying, when we say Europe, we're talking a continent, right? Like, it's not like if you put 4 teams in the UK, that's one thing, but I don't think that's realistic. You're going to have to, for the sake of having a chance at getting a good draw for these franchises, you're going to have to go like London, Paris, Munich, Barcelona. Those types of places, right? Those types of cities. And we're talking about 4 different countries, not 4 different cities, 4 different countries, 4 different governments, 4 different culture. There's so many aspects of that and so many layers that would have to be considered. And it's, that's just, when you really go down the rabbit hole with it, it's kind of overwhelming to think about all the details that would have to be thought about.
Well, look at the model of the Euros that happen every 2 years, and how much logistical issues there are with these teams, these national teams traveling within the continent. All these teams in Europe, Germany, Spain, France, Italy. Don't forget about Italy. I think the NFL, and this is a theory that I have, I think that they're looking at international soccer and seeing how much it has grown, and they're trying to tap into some of that, because these stadiums are massive, and you have a ton of them in all of these countries in Europe, and I think that they believe that they can make the NFL more than it is right now in Europe. But logistically, it's going to take a lot, and I just feel like they either have to decide that they're going to stay where they are. But I think that the hurdle that they need to clear, I think it's the next collective bargaining agreement. I think that because a lot of this stuff with taxes and everything, that has to be collectively bargained. They have to want to put those things in there. The players do, because as you said, there's a lot of concessions. If they do an expansion team out there and you're like, oh, you're part of the expansion draft player pool now, it's like, oh, awesome. Like now I could possibly be drafted over there to a place I don't want to live. I got to move my whole family over there, pay exorbitant taxes, and I didn't ask for any of this. And so I think it does have to be collectively bargained, but they seem to be doing more. I mean, we got games coming up in Germany, and that's what I'm asking is like the goalposts keep moving. At what point does something materialize?
I mean, this is really unprecedented, right? There's no other professional sports league that functions like. I understand like that there's some soccer and things that maybe crosses borders to some degree, but like there's no other something about. I mean, yeah, you go to like England, that's one thing, but like you go to Paris, you go to Munich, you go to Barcelona, you go to somewhere in Italy. We're talking Rome, whatever. Like language barrier to on top of it. So not only you're talking about exorbitant taxes, you're talking about different cultures, a language barrier, and it's not like you just have yourself, you have your entire family to consider in this process. I mean, I guess there's people that work for major corporations, they get sent to work in other countries for periods of time, but I mean, I'm assuming they maybe have a choice, but maybe not, and they're forced to move to China or wherever the work is. I don't know. I mean, it maybe isn't as big of a deal as I think it might be, but we don't see there are no Premier League teams in the United States. There are no, I don't know, like obviously China has their own basketball league. I mean, there's just no, we're not mixing the waters, right? A whole bunch, and so this would be really unprecedented, and it's a daunting task.